right, well, welcome back to the Client Builder Playbook, where we're talking sales all the time with the master, Larry Lewis. How are you, Larry?
I'm doing well, Brian.
All right, so we're getting right into it today. I think it's something that we talk about all the time. It's certainly the way that I was taught to
Hmm.
sell, and that was to always try to find common ground with people, try to build a relationship right out of the gates. Like, hey, I have that jacket. I've
Yeah.
got those shoes. Or if you're doing a house call, you fished? Where'd you catch that fish at? Right? Yeah.
Yeah.
Are those your grandkids? So let's
Yeah.
talk about why that type of opening, if you will, is kind of outdated.
So it works with about half the population. Okay. So if you ever look at the disc profile, and as you know, we screen all of your employees
Yeah.
using disc.
Which is a personality test like
Yeah.
culture. Yeah.
And the S's and the I's are on the talkative end of the spectrum.
Mhm.
They like to engage personally, whereas the D's and the C's, and D stands for dominance, I stands for influence, S stands for steadfast, and C stands for critical thinker, or a lot of different names for it. But the D's and the C's want to get right down to business. They don't want to make small talk. And in fact, the minute you open with small talk with those types of individuals, they automatically start to think, this guy's going to just waste my time. Oh, he's just a bullshit artist. And so,
That happened to me the other day when I was in the furniture store. And I was just like, I could feel the anxiety inside. Like, come on, man. I just want to look at a couch.
well, it's interesting because you and I share the same disc profile,
Yeah.
right? We're both right on the line between D and I, just slightly more D than we are I. But I think that when we're in a buying mode,
Mm,
or depending on how our day is going, if I'm on vacation, I'm Mr. I,
yeah.
right? And I know you are too,
Yes.
because we've had a lot of fun when we're out about. And the I is kind of the life of the party, whereas the D is all about getting things done. So when we're in a work mode, or when time is of the essence for us, we go to our D. And the last thing we want to do is make small talk with the salesperson, because we're there to buy something.
Yep.
Okay. So when we have an advisor who's selling to a prospect, first of all, those prospects come in with their guard up. They're not sure that, you know, think of how a lot of financial advisors are portrayed in the movies. I mean, if you look at Wall Street, or you look at, well, Glenn Ross was about real estate, but
Wolf of Wall Street,
Wolf of Wall
Boiler
Street,
Room.
Boiler Room,
Yeah.
they're all portrayed as sharks.
Yes.
Okay. So if you're somebody that's meeting with a financial advisor, particularly for the first time, you're coming in a little bit guarded because, the way they've been portrayed in the media, they're sharks. Or then you have the exact opposite. You have the salesperson who's the buffoon. That's the Tommy Boy character, right? And so when people sit down with that advisor, they're going to be a little bit reluctant to share a lot of information,
So
okay?
are you saying then that half the population it doesn't work with, so that would be the D's and the C's. So are you
You mean
saying that
the small talk you're talking about?
yeah, the small talk, right?
Yeah.
So does that mean the I and the S are more flexible? You could go either way with them and they'll be fine with it?
Well, the I's and the S's, they want to have a personal relationship with you. They want to warm up to you. Where if you're doing the kind of warm up that you would do with an I or an S,
Hmm.
with a D or a C, the D or C is thinking, can we get down to business here? The C is actually thinking, typical bullshit artist salesperson. Can we get to what we're here to
That's
talk
my
about? Yeah,
wife.
exactly.
She hates small talk, man. Yeah.
So what we err on is we err on the side of talking to the D or the C.
Yep.
The D for dominance, or the C for critical thinker. And what we're trying to do is cater to them first, because we don't want to alienate them. So if we open up with a lot of small talk, oh, I love your offices. Oh, hey, I was there one time, all that chit chat stuff, we're losing the D and the C right out of the gate.
Mhm.
But if we get right down to business with the D or the C, they love us for that,
Mhm.
okay? They don't want to make small talk, okay? However, when you get right down to business with an I or an S, guess what they're going to do? They're going to make small talk.
Mm.
And so now then you have the ability to slow down a little bit and you can have some of that chit chat with the I or with the S that you wouldn't want to waste time on with the D or the C.
I got to ask a question because, you graduate from law school, you're an attorney, you're litigating cases, and then you become one of the best sales trainers in the country for financial advisors. Why the switch? Like, I mean, what?
Well, it's funny. I became a lawyer because I loved the courtroom.
Yeah.
Okay. And when I was in high school, I was in the plays and I loved it. I loved being an actor. When you were in a courtroom, you were the lead actor and the director and the screenwriter all in one.
Do they actually kind of present it that way in law school too?
No,
No.
no,
Okay, but
no.
you can make those
But
parallels.
but that's how I saw
Yeah.
it,
Okay.
and so I love the trial aspect of being a lawyer. But the reality is that as a lawyer today, you might spend 2 weeks out of the year in trial, but you spend, the other 48, 50 weeks doing what I thought was very tedious.
But a trial lawyer, a really good one, is very surgical in the way that they ask questions.
They are.
So when you built Client Builder,
Mm-hmm.
do you think a lot of that you were doing in the courtroom litigating, do you think that helped you develop some of the questioning techniques that you haven't?
Well, think about it. When you're in a courtroom,
Yep.
you're essentially selling your theory of the law or your version of the facts to a judge or jury.
Mm-hmm.
You are truly selling.
Yeah.
Okay. That's what
They just call it making your case.
they call it, making your case.
Right.
Now, when you are a lawyer, you're basically asking witnesses the right questions to make your case.
Mm-hmm.
When you are a salesperson, if you're doing it the right way, you're asking the right questions of your prospect to make the case that they should buy from you. Okay, now the old school approach to selling was not that. The old school approach to selling was, we're going to pitch. Okay, the old school approach to selling was basically what a lawyer does in the opening argument or their closing comments. But candidly, what wins a case is by asking the right questions of the witnesses and getting the witnesses to make the case for you. The right way to sell is to ask the right questions of a prospect so the prospect makes the conclusion or makes the case for you in their own mind that they should buy from you. Okay? It's not about pitching. Okay? In fact, I think that's the mistake that a lot of lawyers make is they focus too much time on their opening and closing arguments. Opening and closing arguments are really designed to pull together all the evidence that's come out during the trial. It's helpful, but the real aha moments that make somebody buy are when you put the right witness on the stand, or I'm sorry, make somebody
Yeah.
decide the case in your favor, is when you put the right witness on the stand, ask them the questions that the jury wants to know of this individual, and they go, oh.
So your opening argument and your closing argument is almost like a salesperson uh, telling and selling, right?
It
You're
is.
you're not really getting anything from the potential client at all. You're just telling your case without asking them how they feel about it. Is it important?
Yeah.
How long's it been a problem? All that kind of stuff.
Now, the secret to being a good lawyer, though, is you're only allowed to introduce things in your opening argument that you intend to prove at
Mm-hmm.
trial.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And you have to be careful because you can't testify as a lawyer. You have to say, these are the things you're going to hear from the witnesses that we're going to present. The key is that you can make a little bit of an opening statement in a sales context, but the goal is to ask questions of the prospect so the prospect comes to the conclusion on their own. and very similar to what you're doing when you're asking questions of a witness, so that the jury now goes, aha. Now in the case of selling,
The jury's in their head.
well, the jury and the witness are the same
The
thing.
jury and the witness are the same thing, right?
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
yeah.
So I guess my question is that in law school, right?
Hmm.
Did they teach questioning techniques? Like, was that a big part of the process?
They did. It's interesting that when I, what most of our audience doesn't know is I sold before I went to law school.
Yeah.
Okay, I went to law school at night 3 years after I had graduated from undergrad, and in those 3 years, I sold. Invaluable experience, because when I became a lawyer, what I realized is, okay, I'm selling my version of the facts or my theory of the law to the judge or the jury. Okay. So I kind of merged those two.
Mm,
And so Client Builder kind of reflects that.
yeah.
Okay. And, it's, it- for example, when we are asking questions of a hostile witness as a lawyer, that's the only time you're allowed to lead a witness. In other words, it's the only time you're allowed to put words in their mouth,
Mm,
okay? Because it's a hostile witness. Unfortunately, the key to doing a great job as a lawyer is to have the right witnesses, ask them open ended questions so that the witnesses basically explain the case to the jury,
got it.
okay? the, the judge, I mean, the lawyer's not allowed to do that. Okay, so as a lawyer, you learn to ask really good questions. In fact, you learn to ask the questions that the jury is thinking. Okay, as a sales professional, you're doing the same thing,
Yeah.
only you're asking the questions of your prospect, because the prospect is going to trust their own voice and the words that come out of their mouth far greater than the words that come out of your mouth. So if you're an old school salesperson and you're telling your prospect what you want them to think, they're skeptical of everything that comes out of your mouth.
I'm assuming you're here because you're looking for safety, right?
Well, that's a tie down question.
Okay.
Okay. That's too obvious
Got
of
it.
what the answer is. So you would really want to ask a question that would be, why are you here?
Mm-hmm.
Just an open ended question.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. When you're trying to move the prospect in the direction that you want them to go, believe it or not, you actually present the opposite of what you want them to think, because it triggers something called reactance.
Safety's probably not something that concerns you.
Exactly.
So let's talk about that. So if I say safety is something that probably doesn't concern you, what's the reactance?
My reactance is to know, no, safety is very important.
And you
Okay.
just verbalized it, which means you're selling yourself.
And it came out of my mouth, as opposed to you saying, I assume that safety is very important to you. Now I feel like you're talking to me and I feel like you're putting words in my mouth. So I'm going to resist that. Okay. So what we will oftentimes do in a sales call is, in order to get somebody to say what we want them to say, we will actually say, so what you're saying is you believe we're putting words in their mouth, but we put the opposite words in their mouth. That triggers
So they have to
reactance, and they say,
correct.
no,
Mm,
I believe the exact opposite. Oh, tell me more about that.
got it.
So it's wild. But what I loved about being a lawyer and what I love about sales is that you're making your case. You're building an argument. But good lawyers and good sales professionals allow the jury or the prospect to build the case in their own minds. Now,
Mm-hmm.
you're guiding them in that process.
Of course.
But if you basically state the case, if you tell them what they're supposed to think, they're going to resist.
Mm-hmm.
It's called reactance.
Yep.
Okay. So we actually use reactance, as you know, in our sales process. When you want to get somebody to think the opposite or to open the door to that, we will tell them emphatically, so what you're telling me is this. And we're basically putting words in their mouth. That causes reactance, and they'll say, no, no, I didn't say that at all. Oh, I'm sorry. I misunderstood you. What are you saying? And now they'll make the case for you. It's crazy.
Now, here's what's very interesting to me when I started learning from you,
Mm-hmm.
I don't know, 15 years ago, whatever it was. Um, I would always think to myself, they're going to catch on to what I'm doing. But here's what I've learned. I know that if there's a good salesperson and I've
Mm-hmm.
come across them,
Mm-hmm.
I know what they're doing to me. And I still can't
Yeah.
help the emotional reactance. And I know what they're doing.
Yes.
And so it's not obvious because it's just for some reason you almost have like a blind spot when it's being done to you.
Yeah, but I also want to make sure that, we're not there to manipulate a
Uh,
prospect.
We're just trying to get the truth.
We're trying to get to the truth.
Yeah.
We're there to allow the prospect, the prospective client, we want their true voice. And the thing that we have to recognize is that everybody goes into a sales interaction with their guard up
Yeah.
because they immediately think, oh, he's a salesperson or she's a salesperson. They're going to try and sell me. I mean, that has a bad connotation. Okay. So we're trying to cut through all that. So you think about one of the things we do at the very start of any sales calls, we talk about the advance agreement.
Yeah, talk about that because we talked about the wrong way to do it and trying to find common ground, right?
Yeah.
And so we want to do it a little bit more
So, and we
professionally.
started by talking about different disc personalities,
Mm-hmm.
So, um, when you're talking about a high D or a high C, those are individuals. The high D is always pressed for time, okay? And D stands for dominance. So they want to control the conversation. The high C is more of like a critical thinker. They're not as quick to make decisions as the high D individual, but they're suspicious oftentimes,
Mm-hmm.
okay? And they don't like to talk, okay? Whereas the I's love to talk, the S's love to talk. Well, when we go into that selling scenario, we don't know what disc profile this person has. And if we start talking too much, the high C individual is going to suddenly say, oh, God, typical salesperson, just bullshit artist. They immediately start to shut down.
So share with people the correct opener to any sales call that's the safest for any type of person.
So when we don't know what the personality of this person is, we want to open by establishing three things. We want to start by establishing how much time do we have,
Yeah.
okay? Let's get that parameter up front, okay? Do we have an hour? Because I've seen this happen many times. You'll have a salesperson who will assume that they have an hour because that's what they scheduled.
Mm-hmm.
And then they're 20 minutes into the meeting and they haven't clarified that up front. And then their prospect looks at it and says, oh, I forgot to tell you that we got to cut this short today. And so they spent the first 20 minutes just, making small talk, thinking that they've got another 40 minutes to try and get to the meat of what they're there to talk about. They find out that they got 10 minutes left. So now the whole thing's a bust. So we want to establish the time parameters up front. That's the number one thing we do. Next thing we do is we want to get a sense for why they wanted to meet with us. We call it the agenda. What was it that led you to want to schedule? What do you want to talk about? Okay. What are the key concerns that you have? And the fact of the matter is, nobody meets with a salesperson unless they have, and they may lie to you. They may say, oh, I just want to hear what you have to say. No, they don't.
Which we have an incredible technique for that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What we
Which
want
changed
is
my
is
game forever.
we want to establish the agenda. What are they here to talk about? What matters most to them? Okay. And so that's the next thing we'll do is say, okay, tell me why you're here. What is it? What are your concerns? And if they're not willing to offer that up, then we have to offer those up. And we offer those up in the form of a 30-second qualifier.
Because you will get people that say, well, I just really want to see what you have. I want to know how you can make my situation better. And you're going, Here we go, right?
Yeah,
Eh,
and the reason that they're doing that is they're afraid. They're
yeah,
afraid to share anything because really they're afraid of being sold.
yeah.
Okay, so we can say is then what I call a 30-second qualifier. We would say typically when I sit down with someone like yourself, someone who's, 60, nearing retirement, the concerns they have are, you know, do I have enough money to retire? Am I taking too much risk with my retirement assets? Is there any danger that I could run out someday? Do you share any of those concerns?
Mhm.
Okay. And we're trying to build an agenda around the things that we can help them solve, the problems that we can help them solve. And then the other thing that we do is we want to position the no on the first appointment. Everybody goes into a sales interaction with a prospect believing that this guy's going to try and sell me. Okay. He's a salesperson after all. When's the pitch going to come? So we like to change things up. So we establish what we call an advance agreement. And what we will say to that individual up front is listen, we're not a good fit for everybody. If I get the sense based on our conversation that what we do here at Secure Money Advisors is not a good fit for what you're looking for in retirement, I'm going to tell you that. Are you okay with that? They don't expect that at all. It's like, what? A sales
I'll
professional?
tell you no. No
Yeah.
problem.
Okay. Um, so if I don't think you're a good fit, I'm going to tell you that. Can you do the same for me? And that's where we
Right.
get that response. Oh,
So as we go through it, if what I'm sharing with you, you feels not a good fit for you, no is perfectly okay to me.
yeah.
Yeah.
And the
Can
minute,
you talk to me about, because I think out of those three,
yeah,
wouldn't you say that that's the most important part of the three steps? I mean, I know they work in synergy
they
together.
work in synergy, but yeah, positioning the no up front,
Is it kind of a little bit of a small takeaway? Is it I'm
it's
dropping
reverse
the defense?
it's reverse psychology.
Yeah.
I mean, here's what happens. I mean, and this is just the crazy thing about people. If you tell somebody they can't have something, that's when they want it.
Hey, listen, with a 3-year-old and 6-year-old, I know that more than ever.
Yes, you do.
Yes.
Exactly.
Yes.
So what we tell somebody up front is we let them know, I says, I don't know enough about your situation to know if you're a good fit for
Yeah.
what we do here.
Right.
But we're not a good fit for everybody. If I get the sense that you're not a good fit for what we do, is it okay if I tell you? I mean, that's in essence what we're saying to them up front. And they go, well, yeah. I said, can you do the same for me? If at the end of our meeting today, you're saying to yourself, I can't see working with a guy, just tell me, because the last thing I want to do is waste your time. Okay. And then the other thing we do is we have to be on the lookout for what I call wishy washy language. All those things like a prospect says, so how does this look to you? I says, well, it looks pretty good.
Pretty good is a red
Pretty,
flag.
pretty,
Yeah.
good is what we want.
Yeah.
So
Seems to be okay.
seems to be, it seems like, what does that mean?
Yeah.
You
So
know?
now let's talk about that, because here's what you taught me, which is so powerful. Seems to be. That's all you taught me to say. So if they say something wishy washy, all you have to do is parrot back and go, seems to me.
Yeah.
And,
And,
and let the silence do the heavy lifting.
and then they'll build on that.
And
They'll enhance their, description. And what we're trying to get is we're trying to get a firm understanding. I don't want think it overs. I don't want wishy washy language. I would rather get a no from a prospect than wishy washy language, because wishy washy language, we get what we call happy ears. I hear that as a salesperson and I think I've got somebody. I mean, they're interested.
yeah.
When in fact, they really didn't want to hurt her feelings. So they preface it with some of that wishy-washy language, and all of a sudden it's like, we hear what we want to hear.
Mm-hmm.
Now my radar goes off, and that's a skill that you and I have trained ourselves to do. The minute we hear wishy-washy language, such as pretty good, or I think so, or probably, the siren goes off in her head and says, "This guy, he's not convicted. I mean, he doesn't believe what he's telling me at all." So the minute I hear wishy-washy language, I'm going to actually push for the no. I get the feeling what you're saying is you really don't like this.
Mm-hmm.
And now what happens is they say, "No, no, I didn't say that." Well, can you tell me what you are saying? And at the end of the day, from prospects, we want to get yeses and we want to get nos. We don't want to get the in between because we don't know what to do with the in between. If we get the in between, think about it. If I get a no, it's over.
Right.
Okay. If I get a yes, person's going to become a client. If I get the I think so, and I don't have any greater clarification than that, what happens then is the appointment ends. There's no clear next step. Okay. I'm now chasing and I'm wasting a lot of time. I'd rather get a no. Okay. So that now I don't waste my time with a prospect that's really not interested, that just didn't have the guts to tell me that. It's like, I mean, remember back in our dating days, and a girl would want to let you down easy. So she'd say something, "It's not you, it's me. I'm just not ready to have a serious relationship," or some
To be
BS
honest with you,
excuse.
Larry, no girl's ever broken up with me, so I don't know what that feels like. But but
Yeah. My
so
B, my BS meter just went off. Um,
I want to ask you two questions
but
before we.
what we would do as the inexperienced dater
Yep.
is we would hear what we want to hear.
Yeah.
And one of the things that we train sales professionals to do is we want to get rid of the wishy-washy. Let's make it a clear yes or a clear no. If it's a clear no, it's over. I know how to handle that. Now it's time to go find somebody else. If it's a clear yes, great. Now I know how to handle that. They're going to become a client. It's the in between stuff that causes us to be lost. And it's the in between stuff that wastes a lot of our time. And the worst thing it does is because there's a healthy dose of optimism in every salesperson's mind. They couldn't last in this profession if they didn't have some internal optimism. So they get happy ears. They hear what they want to hear. They hear a statement that's filled with wishy-washy language. "I think I'd like to probably do this." And we think, "Oh, they're really interested." No, they just gave you a whole bunch of wishy-washy language. We would push for the no in that scenario because I want a clear yes or a clear no. If I get wishy-washy language, I hear what I want to hear. And they're just letting me down easy. I'd rather get a no than the wishy-washy language.
Well, this has been another good episode, but before we wrap up, because on the next episode, what I want to talk about is I think when you get so good at the client builder process, um, there is risk that you can become so good at qualifying that you could potentially overqualify, right?
Yeah.
Because you're so good at asking questions,
Mm-hmm.
right? And sometimes you might disqualify someone that if you would have just taken the next step with them, you could have gotten. I want to talk about that when we come back.
I think that's a great topic for the next episode because some people, what happens in that case is they only win the clients which are, you know, clearly
Articulating the perfect answer.
yes, and
Yeah.
and it's like they're ready to go. The effective salesperson is that one that is able to qualify the people in the middle, the people where there's still a lot of wishy-washy stuff, and that's what we need to talk about in the next episode.
Yes, absolutely. So we will see you again on the next episode of Client Builder Playbook. Thanks again for joining Larry and I. We'll see you again soon.